The warm glow of the vintage brass lamps cast an elegant ambiance throughout the grand lobby of the Meridian Hotel as 28-year-old Caroline Walsh moved gracefully between the mahogany reception desk and the comfortable seating areas where guests often lingered over evening coffee. Her crisp white blouse and navy skirt reflected the professional standards she had maintained during her 2 years working as the evening concierge at one of the city's most prestigious establishments. Caroline took genuine pride in her work, finding satisfaction in helping guests feel welcomed and cared for during their stays. Whether someone needed restaurant recommendations, theater tickets, or simply directions to the nearest pharmacy, Caroline approached each request with the kind of attentive service that had earned her recognition as Employee of the Month on multiple occasions. Among the hotel's regular visitors, there was one guest who had particularly captured Caroline's attention, though not in the way she might have expected. For the past 6 months, a man in his late 30s had been staying at the hotel every few weeks, always alone, always courteous, and always carrying himself with a quiet sadness that touched something in Caroline's compassionate heart. The guest was registered as David Harrison, and he typically booked a suite on the 15th floor for 3 or 4 nights at a time. He was handsome in an understated way, with dark hair and kind eyes, and he dressed in well-tailored suits that suggested professional success. But what struck Caroline most was his obvious loneliness. He would sit in the lobby each evening with a book or his laptop, ordering room service rather than dining out, and declining her offers to arrange social activities or entertainment. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison," Caroline said with her warm smile as David approached the concierge desk on this particular Thursday night. "How may I help you this evening?" "Hello, Caroline," David replied, using her name in the respectful way he always did. "I was wondering if you might recommend a quiet restaurant nearby. Something with good food but not too crowded or noisy." Caroline had made similar recommendations for David many times before, but she had begun to notice that he rarely seemed to act on her suggestions. Instead, he would usually order room service and spend his evenings alone in his suite or reading in the lobby. "Of course," Caroline said, reaching for her list of recommended restaurants. "Are you looking for any particular type of cuisine?" "Actually," David said, hesitating slightly, "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner. I know it is probably not appropriate to ask, and I understand if you cannot accept, but I thought perhaps you might know of a place where we could have a quiet conversation over a good meal." Caroline felt her cheeks warm with surprise. In 2 years of working at the hotel, she had received dinner invitations from guests before, but something about David's request felt different. There was no presumption or inappropriate undertone, just the simple request of someone who seemed genuinely lonely and who had come to appreciate their brief conversations at the concierge desk. "Mr. Harrison," Caroline began carefully, "that is very kind of you. But I need to be mindful of hotel policies about staff socializing with guests." "I completely understand," David said immediately. "I did not mean to put you in an uncomfortable position. I suppose I have just enjoyed our conversation so much that I thought it might be nice to continue one over dinner rather than here in the lobby." Caroline found herself touched by David's obvious disappointment and his gracious acceptance of her professional boundaries. Over the months, she had grown fond of their brief exchanges and had often wondered about the story behind his frequent stays and apparent solitude. "You know what?" Caroline said, making a decision that surprised even her. "I get off work in 2 hours. There is a lovely bistro about 3 blocks from here that serves excellent French cuisine in a very relaxed atmosphere. If you would like to meet there around 9 o'clock, I would enjoy having dinner with you." David's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That sounds wonderful. Thank you, Caroline. I promise to be a perfect gentleman." Caroline spent the remainder of her shift wondering if she had made the right decision. She knew very little about David beyond their professional interactions, but something about his consistent kindness and respectful demeanor had convinced her that accepting his invitation was safe. The bistro David had chosen was indeed perfect for quiet conversation. Over excellent wine and beautifully prepared food, Caroline learned that David was a businessman who traveled frequently for work, that he had lost his wife in a car accident 3 years earlier, and that he had been struggling to find meaning and connection in his life since her death. "I stay at the Meridian because it feels more like a home than the apartment I have been living in since Martha passed away," David explained. "The staff is wonderful, and you in particular have always made me feel welcomed rather than just tolerated." Caroline felt her heart go out to this man who was clearly still grieving the loss of his life partner. "I am so sorry for your loss. It must be incredibly difficult to travel alone when you are accustomed to sharing experiences with someone you love." "It is," David admitted, "but tonight has been the first time in a very long while that I have enjoyed a meal and conversation. You have a gift for making people feel comfortable and valued." Over the following weeks, David and Caroline began meeting regularly for dinner when he was in town. Caroline looked forward to these evenings, finding herself drawn to David's intelligence, his gentle sense of humor, and his obvious efforts to heal from his profound loss. David, meanwhile, began to feel something he had not experienced since Martha's death: the possibility of opening his heart to love again. What Caroline did not know was that David Harrison was actually David Harrison Meridian, the owner of the hotel chain that bore his family name. He had inherited the business from his father 2 years earlier and had been working to modernize and expand the company while dealing with his personal grief. His frequent stays at various Meridian properties were actually working visits, though. He had grown particularly attached to the flagship hotel where Caroline worked. The revelation came unexpectedly during what had become their regular Thursday evening dinner. Caroline was telling David about her hopes of eventually studying hotel management when she mentioned her admiration for the way the Meridian chain was managed. "I have always been impressed by how well the company treats its employees," Caroline said. "Whoever owns it clearly understands that good service comes from people who feel valued and supported." David set down his wine glass and looked at Caroline with an expression that was both fond and apprehensive. "Caroline, there is something I need to tell you about that." Something in his tone made Caroline's heart skip slightly. "What do you mean?" "I am David Harrison Meridian," he said quietly. "My family owns the hotel chain, including the property where you work. I have been staying there as part of my responsibilities as the company owner, but also because I have genuinely enjoyed being somewhere that you made feel like home." Caroline stared at him for a long moment, processing this unexpected revelation. "You own the Meridian hotels? You are my boss?" "Technically, yes," David replied. "But I want you to know that everything between us has been genuine. I did not seek you out because you work for my company. I was drawn to you because of your kindness, your intelligence, and the way you made a grieving widower feel human again." Caroline felt a mixture of emotions as she tried to understand what this meant for their relationship. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you would see me as the owner of the company rather than just David, the lonely guest who looked forward to your smile each evening when I came downstairs." Caroline looked at this man who had become so important to her and realized that learning about his wealth and position did not change anything fundamental about who he was or how she felt about him. "David," Caroline said finally, "I fell in love with someone who was kind to everyone he met, who listened when I talked about my dreams, and who made me laugh even when he was dealing with his own sadness. That person is still sitting across from me, regardless of what hotels he happens to own." 6 months later, David proposed to Caroline in the same lobby where they had first gotten to know each other. She said yes, not because he could offer her financial security, but because he had shown her that the most valuable treasures in life are the connections we build with people who see us for who we truly are. Caroline continued working at the hotel until their wedding, though she eventually transitioned into a role helping David develop employee wellness programs across the Meridian chain. Her experience as a frontline staff member gave her valuable insights into creating work environments where people felt genuinely supported and appreciated. David learned that the best way to honor Martha's memory was not by remaining alone, but by opening his heart to love again with someone who had taught him that healing comes through connection, kindness, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. The most meaningful relationships often begin with simple acts of genuine care and attention, and that true wealth is measured not in the properties we own, but in the love we share with people who value our hearts over our bank accounts.